Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. GOP Congressman Doug LaMalfa has died at the age of 65. His passing further narrows the slim Republican majority in the House. Attorney General Pam Bondi says President Trump saved countless lives. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the U.S. is the world's last great superpower. The latest on the capture of former dictator Nicolás Maduro. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado vows to return home and praises President Trump for toppling Nicolás Maduro. The CDC makes major changes to vaccine recommendations for the first time ever, dropping several recommendations. We have details about those changes. Comments by President Trump on taking over Greenland ruffle some feathers in Europe, with leaders backing Denmark and urging collective Arctic security through NATO.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Tuesday, January 6th. I'm Stephanie Cox. GOP Congressman Doug LaMalfa has died at the age of 65. He represented parts of Northern California. He also served as the chair of the Congressional Western Caucus. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer confirmed the news on X. LaMalfa's cause of death is not clear at this present moment. Emmer said he and his wife were devastated by the sudden loss. He described LaMalfa as a loving father and husband. He also called him a strong advocate for his constituents in rural America. Emmer said prayers are with LaMalfa's wife, Jill, and their children. LaMalfa's passing reduces the House Republican majority to 218 to 213. It comes after the retirement of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. And President Trump spoke to House Republicans today during a meeting at the Trump Kennedy Center. In addition to discussing the GOP's agenda ahead of this year's midterms, Trump hailed the recent military operation against former dictator Nicolás Maduro.
You know, our guys are jumping out of helicopters and they're not protected, and they were, but it was so brilliant. The electricity for almost the entire country was, boom, turned on. That's when they knew there was a problem. There was no electricity. Caracas said, there's no electricity. It's not the only people with lights were the people that had candles. It was just off. So we sort of got them a little by surprise, but it was brilliant tactically. It was an incredible thing.
In addition to touting that operation, Trump discussed key features of the GOP agenda for the year. The president touched on several topics, including the economy, health care, and tariffs. Trump also took the opportunity to push for voter ID.
But we have to have voter ID. And you know, when you confront a Democrat about voter ID, like in a debate or something, I said it a couple of times with Biden, and just they're very embarrassed when they say, we want voter ID, voter identification. The only reason somebody doesn't want that is because they want to cheat.
Trump also expressed his condolences following the death of Congressman Doug LaMalfa. The president called LaMalfa, quote, a fierce champion on California water issues and a true defender of American children. And our thoughts are with his family also. George Conway, once married to former Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway, announced today that he's running for a U.S. House seat in New York City. Conway is a former Republican and co-founder of the anti-Trump Lincoln Project. He said he was inspired to run after a friend expressed frustration with some Democrats' decision to vote to end last year's government shutdown. He decided to pursue a Manhattan seat opening after Congressman Jerry Nadler announced his retirement. Conway relocated back to the city recently. He positions himself as a seasoned Trump critic, saying Congress needs people who can fight the president effectively. The district covers Midtown Manhattan and the Upper East and Upper West sides and is considered solidly Democratic. Next, more on the Venezuela operation. President Trump says the U.S. is not at war with Venezuela, but is working to combat drug trafficking. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest from government officials. after the surprise capture of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro.
President Trump says the United States wants to fix Venezuela before the country can hold its next election. The president did not give a time frame, but projected that the process would take a while. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the Venezuela operation was a law enforcement function to arrest indicted individuals well within the president's Article 2 powers, speaking on Fox News.
The charges, Maduro and his wife are charged with directing, and it's just an indictment now, they are charged with directing the murders, kidnappings, assaults of anyone who stood in their way, and also anyone who tried to stop their drug business.
Bondi says they are also charged with bringing hundreds of tons of cocaine into the U.S. and for working with cartels like the Sinaloa cartel and gangs like Tren de Aragua.
The president saved thousands, countless lives tonight, countless lives with the drug trade. But he also protected Americans from the TDA members who Maduro let into our country, forced into our country, opened his jails, opened the insane asylums to come into our country. Look at Laken Riley. Look at Claritha Daniels. Look at Jocelyn Nungray. All of them killed by TDA members.
Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller says the Venezuelan casualties during the operation were among Maduro's Cuban Guard.
Many don't realize that for years, Maduro stayed in power through an illicit deal with Cuban communists to provide his security because he didn't trust his own people to keep him safe. That is how much he was hated inside of Venezuela.
Miller says by definition, the U.S. is in charge of Venezuela.
We have the United States military stationed outside the country. We set the terms and conditions. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. The United States is running the country during this transition period. That now, obviously, that doesn't mean that President Trump is setting the bus fare schedule inside the country. Doesn't mean that President Trump is deciding the K-12 curriculum in the country.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday briefed lawmakers on the operation. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the administration's plans, calling them vague and unsatisfying.
I did not receive any assurances that we would not try to do the same thing in other countries.
House Speaker Mike Johnson said the operation did not require prior consent from Congress.
The president used his authority under the law. He did so in a way that caused no casualties on the American side, and got the job done with exquisite intelligence and extreme precision that can only be done by the U.S.
Johnson says the U.S. is the world's last and great superpower.
We stand for justice, and you're going to see that meted out here. It's overdue, and everyone will be safer because this has happened.
Currently, the nation's interim leader is Delcy Rodriguez, who was originally Venezuela's vice president. Venezuela's oil sector holds the world's largest proven reserves at over 300 billion barrels, nearly 1/5 of the global total. President Trump says the U.S. oil industry could get new operations in Venezuela up and running in less than 18 months. In the 1970s, the Venezuelan government nationalized energy assets such as those owned by ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. Nationalizations in 2006 and 2007 under Hugo Chavez forced Exxon and Conoco to leave the country entirely. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thanks to Daniel for that report. Venezuelan opposition figure Maria Corina Machado said yesterday she hopes to share her Nobel Peace Prize with President Trump. Speaking on Fox News, Machado says she wishes to thank Trump directly for ousting former dictator Nicolás Maduro.
I dedicated to President Trump because I believed at that point that he deserved it. And a lot of people, most people said it was impossible to achieve what he has just done on Saturday, January 3rd. So if I believed he deserved it on October, imagine now. I think he has proven to the world what he means. I mean, January 3rd will go down in history as the day justice defeated a tyranny.
Machado has vowed to return home quickly. The industrial engineer and mother of three escaped from Venezuela in disguise in October to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in Norway. She said she and others believed the transition should move forward. Machado pointed out that the opposition won an election in 2024 by a landslide despite fraudulent conditions. Machado said she has not spoken to Trump since October 10th, when the Nobel was announced. The president has said the United States needs to help address Venezuela's problems before any new elections. An unknown trader has won more than $400,000 on Polymarket after betting that Nicolás Maduro would be ousted from power. The anonymous account was created last month. The trader placed bets that would pay off if Maduro was out by the end of January. The mystery trade is likely to attract scrutiny from U.S. lawmakers. Some officials have been pushing for stricter insider trading rules, including a bipartisan effort to potentially ban stock trading among lawmakers. Congressman Richie Torres said he plans to introduce a bill this week. The legislation would bar elected officials and federal employees from placing bets on prediction market platforms. Prediction markets, like Polymarket, allow users to bet on a wide range of real-world events. Wagers range from outcomes on sports, entertainment, politics, and the economy. And coming up, how will Maduro's capture affect the global energy market? Our guest will weigh in. And the CDC makes major changes to vaccine recommendations, for the first time ever dropping several recommendations for children. We have the details about those changes after this. Welcome back. As the world's need for energy increases at an unprecedented rate, from AI to national security needs, oil is set to play an outsized role in geopolitics going forward. How does Nicolás Maduro's recent capture by the U.S. impact the global balance of power going forward? Joining us now is Diana Furchtgott-Roth. She's the director of the Center for Energy, Climate, and the Environment at the Heritage Foundation, and we're so glad to speak with you today, Diana. Venezuela
Great to be with you.
Certainly. I'm so looking forward to getting into this with you. Venezuela, of course, holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, yet its output has collapsed. How did 2 decades of socialist rule turn that advantage into an economic disaster that we're seeing today?
Well, if you expropriate people's assets, then and think that you can run them yourselves, then gradually you get less and less oil. And that's exactly what happened in Venezuela. Socialism, collectivism does not work to run an economy anywhere. And what greater proof of this than in Venezuela, which used to be the jewel of South America. And then Chavez took over. Oil production went down, food prices went up, inflation soared, and it is where it is today. Instead of 3.5 million barrels of oil a day, it's less than 1 million, even though it has the largest oil reserves in the world, over 300 billion barrels.
And if a post-Maduro government reopened Venezuela with investment from the U.S. and its allies, how much and how quickly do you think Venezuela's oil production realistically could rebound, and what would that mean for global prices at the pump as well?
Well, if you look at back in 1989, when the United States removed Noriega from Panama, 2 or 3 years later, the Panamanian economy was booming. The same could be true of Venezuela if a good government system, a system of property rights and laws was put in place. But there's about $23 billion worth of claims against the Venezuelan government from different companies from which it has appropriated assets. And I think those would have to be settled, or there would have to be a pathway to settlement. Because you know the saying, fool me twice, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. No, it's fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. And so there is the possibility that this would happen again if it wasn't fixed.
Turning to that, the Chinese Communist regime has been exchanging oil with Venezuela in large part to pay for debts that the regime in Venezuela owes to China. And of course, they are the biggest importer currently of Venezuelan oil. So in a recent article of yours, you say that Trump's Venezuela takeover is a blow to the Chinese Communist regime and its leader, Xi Jinping, in this new global resource war. Talk about why that is.
Well, China needs all the oil it can because it doesn't produce any oil of its own. It gets oil from Venezuela. This gives it additional flexibility. And by cutting off that oil to China, this hurts not only the Chinese economy, but Chinese influence in South America, where China is vacuuming up critical minerals. So this is a big blow to China. It's a big blow to Cuba. Venezuela supplies Cuba with oil, and in exchange, Cuba sends soldiers and doctors to Venezuela. And there's implications for Russia and Iran too. I can assure you that this invasion sent a ray of hope to the Iranian opposition.
A ray of hope to the Iranian opposition. Tell me more.
There are Iranian demonstrators fighting against the regime there. And now that the United States has come and taken out Maduro, there is hope that President Trump will also stand with the demonstrators in Iran. It shows that President Trump is on the side of good, is on the side of democracy, and there is equal or more authoritarianism in Iran than there is in Venezuela. And President Trump has said to the Iranian mullahs, if you shoot the demonstrators, I will come after you. So his invasion of Venezuela, his liberation of the Venezuelan people, also gives hope to the Iranian people.
And at this particular inflection point, even more powerful, as you mentioned, with those protests. Coming back to China, how much practical control does Beijing now have over Venezuelan barrels, infrastructure, and even digital surveillance inside the country?
There's a great deal of cooperation between China and Venezuela, and this is basically putting a mark on that. It's setting the stage for kicking China out of Latin America, making China leave America's backyard, because it's not just Venezuela, it's also critical minerals in other countries in Latin America and South America that China is using to produce its 70% of the global share of the world's batteries, solar panels, wind turbines. And China needs these minerals to power its renewable economy, which it's been imposing on the West with fake environmental claims of alarmism. So this is very significant for China, as well as for Cuba, Russia, Iran.
Yeah, let's look at Cuba and Russia and the potential impacts now with this shift post-Maduro.
If we get the Venezuelan oil economy going again, if Venezuela can export its oil, the price might conceivably be lower, and that would reduce the revenues that Russia has from its oil. And Russia is using its oil revenues to invade Ukraine to fund its military ambitions. So this has vast effects on Russia also. The potential increase in Venezuelan oil supply would be very significant.
And what are opposition leaders and ordinary Venezuelans you're following actually calling for in terms of energy and economic reform? And what safeguards do you think would need to be in place to avoid repeating the same socialist collapse?
Well, after Noriega was ousted back in 1989, people were saying that America should not have done that military intervention. It was very successful. Panama continues to be successful. The same can happen with Venezuela. Venezuela is a natural democracy. And if the right system of governance is put in place with elections, then Venezuela could easily regain its prior strength. This is not something new. Democracy is not new to Venezuela. Capitalism is not new. Production, wealth are not new, and these could grow again.
Great to hear your insights today. Thank you so much for your time, Diana Furchtgott-Roth. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
And next, federal officials are moving to halt more than $10 billion in child care and social services funding to 5 states. They're concerned that benefits may have gone to non-citizens. According to the New York Post, citing U.S. officials, the Trump administration plans to freeze funding administered by the Department of Health and Human Services. President Trump posted the article to his Truth Social account. The pause would affect California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. It includes money from the Child Care Development Fund, temporary assistance for needy families, and the Social Services Block Grant. More than $7 billion in needy families funding alone could be withheld. Officials say letters citing concerns about improper payments were sent to state leaders yesterday. Democratic officials in several states criticized the move, warning it could harm low-income families, while federal agencies continue reviewing alleged misuse of funds. Now to Minnesota, where a hotel cancellation involving ICE agents is drawing sharp criticism from the Department of Homeland Security. The cancellation in a Minneapolis suburb prompted an apology from Hilton and local operators. Here's more on that.
Homeland Security said the Hilton's Hampton Inn in Lakeville canceled several of its agents' reservations after they were booked with official government emails. This prompted DHS to accuse Hilton of being part of what it called a coordinated campaign against immigration enforcement. The department released a redacted email from a hotel employee confirming the cancellations, which said, "We are not allowing any ICE or immigration agents to stay at our property. If you are with DHS or immigration, let us know, as we will have to cancel your reservation." Hilton responded by saying the hotel is independently owned and the actions did not reflect the company's values. The local operator, Everpeak Hospitality, also issued an apology and said it is working to accommodate the affected agents. The incident comes as ICE significantly expands enforcement operations nationwide. The agency announced Monday that it hired more than 12,000 officers and agents in less than a year as part of an unprecedented recruitment campaign. According to ICE, that number represents a 120% increase in manpower. Officials say those additional agents are already being deployed across the country. Florida is one of the states reporting major immigration enforcement activity. Governor Ron DeSantis highlighted the state's arrest numbers, saying Florida had turned over tens of thousands of illegal immigrants to the Department of Homeland Security.
So there's no other state that has been able to do anything approaching what the state of Florida has been able to do. And Operation Tidal Wave's over 10,000, but then if you look at the other efforts of the counties combined, we're close to 20,000 arrests that have occurred just in the last year.
Of those people, DeSantis says 63% had prior arrests or convictions, including violent offenses and sex offenses.
The CDC has made major changes to its vaccine recommendations, more closely aligning with international norms in other developed countries. NTD's Melina Wisecup brings us the details from Washington, D.C.
The CDC is narrowing the number of shots recommended to all children. The vaccines dropped from the broadly recommended schedule include influenza, rotavirus, hepatitis A, and the vaccine to address meningitis. This is in addition to the CDC's previously dropped recommendations for vaccines for hepatitis B and COVID-19. While the new schedule is meant to address the general public, the CDC still keeps some recommendations in place for high-risk groups. Vaccines that are removed from the updated schedule will still be available for parents and covered through federal insurance programs like the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. So the goal here is not to make vaccines less available, but to give parents more transparency and control over whether or not to let their children get them in the first place. Though some health experts are concerned about the broader impacts of these new guidelines, like if it will create confusion or what it could mean for public health.
Could have been done, perhaps, is a more public review so that people can understand what the changes are and whether they agree with them or not.
From another point of view, one California-based pediatrician, Dr. Joel Warsh, clarified to the Epoch Times that, quote, reducing universal recommendations doesn't mean vaccines are being banned or declared unsafe. It means the CDC is finally acknowledging that not every vaccine has the same risk-benefit profile for every child. The Health and Human Services Deputy Secretary defended his new schedule, expressing that it's questionable that the number of shots recommended has only increased over the years.
They've gone from 23 doses for 7 diseases in 1980 to more than 80 doses for 18 diseases now. That's a huge number of vaccines. Many parents are concerned that they're injecting their young, innocent children with a lot of medicines. They're not sure about the risks and benefits of all these.
The CDC consulted with Denmark, Germany, Japan, and vaccine scientists at the CDC and FDA to make the changes. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
A school district in Maine is in the spotlight over potential free speech violations. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon called the policy of suspending students for not using preferred pronouns concerning. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with Supreme Court litigation chief Erin Marcino about the case.
Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon commented on a video of a discussion at the Berwick-Lebanon School Board in Maine over pronouns, saying the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has been investigating similar policies in other jurisdictions. In the video, Berwick and Lebanon schools in Maine confirmed the policy of suspending students if they don't use a trans-identifying student's preferred pronouns.
For clarification, is this the policy that's used if a student misuses a pronoun, they are suspended?
An intentional. Yeah, that's part of the definition of bullying.
Berwick-Lebanon School Board member Josh Tabor questioned the fairness of suspending students for what he described as speaking the truth.
My question is, are we suspending students for immutable facts? That's what I'm asking.
Not for making a genuine mistake. If somebody is doing what you're sort of doing here and sort of trying to attack somebody because you don't agree with it, that's very different.
Chief of Supreme Court litigation Erin Marcino says Supreme Court precedent indicates that the school district's policy very likely violates the First Amendment.
Here in this public school setting, they're saying that having a certain opinion on gender ideology based on biological chromosomes is harassment, which is a pretty extreme policy that we haven't seen enforced in the courts before.
The attorney says the school board is really overstepping its authority.
In terms of saying a pronoun that aligns with the speaker's biological or biblical worldview, that should be protected speech. And the school district should not have jurisdiction over those views that are matters of opinion and religion and science.
Marcino says when the Supreme Court analyzes free speech cases, it looks concretely at the person's speech.
The student's speech here in this case, and what doesn't tip that speech to be unlawful speech that should be silenced is the reaction of the listener. And here, because they are having this policy all hinging upon the reaction of the listener, the person who's identifying as transgender, then it really shouldn't hold up under the First Amendment.
The attorney says that in moving to protect one group, they are discriminating against another.
What they have done in the name of trying to protect the rights of students is they've required other students' rights to be unprotected. Anyone who has certain religious beliefs or beliefs regarding biology, their rights are being directly infringed now.
Marcino says a school should be a place where students are not required to adopt certain viewpoints.
They're not required to change their religious beliefs. It should be a place where there's actual discussion and people have respect and they have the rights that they are required to have under the First Amendment, and they're allowed to speak, but it doesn't cross the line into infringing upon the individual's rights.
The Supreme Court litigation chief says compelled speech in general is really frowned upon by the Supreme Court. Justices, says Marcino, have been very protective of students to defend them against compelled speech. I reached out to the school district by phone and by email. They did not respond to requests for comment. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. And the National Rifle Association is suing its own nonprofit arm. The suit alleges the foundation is being used by disgruntled former board members attempting to take control of the NRA. The foundation was formed in 1990 to fund the gun rights organization's educational and charitable work. The lawsuit accuses foundation leadership of trademark infringement, unfair competition, trademark dilution, and unauthorized diversion of charitable assets, among other charges. According to court documents, the group alleges ongoing and threatened misuse of approximately $160 million raised by or with the NRA. And the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is shutting down after losing federal funding. CPB's board voted yesterday to dissolve the organization after nearly 6 decades. The nonprofit was created by Congress in the 60s to distribute funds to NPR, PBS, and other public radio and TV stations. CPB had been winding down since Congress acted last summer to defund its operations. Its board of directors chose Monday to shutter CPB completely instead of keeping it in its existence as a shell. The organization's president said dissolving was meant to protect public media from further attacks. Many Republicans have long accused networks like NPR and PBS of being biased toward liberals. In March last year, the CEOs of both networks testified on Capitol Hill amid allegations of far-left biases. And U.S. representatives are in Paris working to finalize security guarantees for Ukraine. What those guarantees might look like in practice and the commitments the U.S. and other countries are set to make, that's ahead. Plus, fire safety under scrutiny in Switzerland. Officials say no fire inspections were done since 2019 at a bar where a New Year's blaze killed 40 people. Those stories after this. I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. We start off with U.S. representatives in Paris meeting in Ukraine for a meeting in Ukraine. The leaders of about 30 countries are working to finalize security guarantees for Kyiv, among other things. Snow is blanketing the Eiffel Tower and the park around it as a so-called coalition of the willing meets in Paris. The key topic is security guarantees for Ukraine. According to Reuters, the coalition issued a draft statement with more details. The document shows the guarantees will include binding commitments to support Ukraine in the case of a future armed attack by Russia. The commitments may be in the form of using military capabilities, intelligence, and logistical support, and more. The draft still needs approval from the coalition's leaders later today. We'll be certainly keeping you updated there. Next, comments by President Trump about potentially taking control of Greenland are drawing reactions from Europe. Of course, those started a while back, but here we have more comments in recent days. Leaders from several major European powers issued a joint statement today backing Denmark and Greenland, saying that the Arctic belongs to its people. The leaders stressed that decisions concerning Greenland should be made by Denmark and Greenland alone. They also said Arctic security must be handled collectively with NATO allies, including the United States. And President Trump repeatedly has said that the U.S. needs Greenland for national security purposes, you may recall. Its strategic position between Europe and North America, though, makes it critical to U.S. ballistic missile defense, and its mineral resources are seen as key to reducing reliance on Chinese exports. Greenland's prime minister said yesterday that his government wants stronger ties with Washington and added that residents should not fear an imminent U.S. takeover. Next, new information about the Swiss bar that burst into flames, tragically killing 40 people. The mayor of the ski resort of Crans, Montana, said today that no safety inspections were carried out since 2019.
We deeply regret this. The courts will determine the impact of this oversight on the chain of events that led to the tragedy. We will assume all the responsibility that the courts determine.
Officials say that fire inspections should be carried out annually in the town's bars. The mayor says the bar passed the one in 2019. The soundproof foam on its ceiling was considered acceptable at that time, and a fire alarm was not required due to the bar's size. Most of the victims of the New Year's blaze were tragically quite young. They were mostly teenagers. Prosecutors say the fire spread rapidly and was likely caused by sparkling candles igniting the ceiling of the bar's basement. The ceiling was covered in a foam material used for soundproofing. Sparkler candles have since been banned inside that town's venues. And next, the capture of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro is now seen as a major blow to the Chinese Communist Party, and the CCP is working to condemn his ouster in a special meeting at the United Nations. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has that report.
Millions of Venezuelans that have fled this brutal regime are celebrating and cheering around the world as this body pontificates.
Just blocks away from where former Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro and his wife appear in a New York courtroom, the United Nations Security Council debates President Trump's decision to capture Maduro. The meeting's held at the request of Colombia, and it's backed by China and Russia, all allies of Maduro. The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, says that the action is a surgical law enforcement operation.
This was a law enforcement operation. The United States arrested a narco-trafficker who is now going to stand trial.
The capture of Maduro is seen as a blow to China's influence in the Western Hemisphere. A delegation from the Chinese Communist Party was meeting with Maduro in Venezuela over the weekend, just hours before he was captured.
Venezuela was a forward operating base for China, Russia, Iran, and the rest of what we call the China axis.
China has worked to establish its influence in Latin America by lending money to build infrastructure projects and persuading those countries to cut ties with Taiwan. And it's been successful in doing so over the last 20 years, with several countries like Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama jumping on board. In Panama, a CCP-linked company was leasing the main entry and exit points of the Panama Canal for a while, putting China in a position to cut off nearly half of U.S. trade. Venezuela, meanwhile, has deepened its relations with the CCP ever since going back to dictator Hugo Chavez. After Chavez died in 2013, Maduro took over, continuing those relations with China. Maduro even enrolled his son in China's top-ranking Beijing University back in 2016. And all along, Venezuela has been supplying China with oil. Roughly 80% of Venezuela's oil exports have been going to China and are sold at a significant discount. But without Maduro, that could change.
So we'll be selling large amounts of oil to other countries, many of whom are using it now, but I would say many more will come.
For now, Venezuelan residents are cheering in the streets, celebrating the news that Maduro will face justice. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Coming up, in tennis, 45-year-old Venus Williams looks to make history at the Australian Open. NTD's Dave Martin joining us to discuss. And a Scottish island supplies dense granite for Olympic curling stones. The rock's natural properties make it ideal for one of the most famous sports at the Games. We'll be taking a look at that after this.
Do you feel overwhelmed by the constantly changing real estate market? You're definitely not alone. So many of our clients feel the same. That's why who you work with matters. I work with HomeLight to get the best deals for my clients. Whether you're looking to sell for the right price or hunting for that dream home, let's make your real estate experience smooth and rewarding. Start your journey at homelight.com today.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. You may know me from my many years on television. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. I didn't get it. I did not get it. A few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. It
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, there is so much coming up, including college football and fantasy football news, which I'm looking forward to. But let's start with tennis. 45-year-old Venus Williams received a wild card entry to play at the Australian Open this month. Pretty exciting. Where does she rank, though, in terms of, her age?
The oldest ever to actually play in the Australian Open, 45 years old, like you said. Previously, that record was held by a 44-year-old Kimiko Date back in 2015. Now, Williams actually hasn't played this event since 2021, though she still remains semi-active on the tour. Now, she first played this event, though, back in 1998 as a 17-year-old, lost in the quarterfinals then to fellow American Lindsay Davenport. Twice, though, she has made the finals here. That was 2003 and 2017. Both times, though, she lost to her sister Serena in the finals. Now, last summer, she became the second oldest woman ever to win a tour-level match when she beat Peyton Stearns. Only the great Martina Navratilova won at an older age. So the Australian Open starts on January 18, less than 2 weeks away. I know it's your big event.
It is big. I've never been in person, but it is exciting, and she's great, so we're looking forward to that. Okay, let's shift gears to college football. ESPN is reporting that Ole Miss will have their offensive coordinator and running backs coach when they play Miami in the playoffs Thursday night. What is the significance of that?
Well, this is such an unprecedented situation. Ole Miss's head coach, Lane Kiffin, left right after the regular season ended. They had an 11-1 record. They qualified for the playoffs, though. Now, he took some of his assistant coaches with him to LSU. Now, the two that you mentioned, the offensive coordinator, that's Charlie Weiss Jr., and running backs coach Kevin Smith. Both of those two left. Now, meanwhile, another former assistant, his defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, then was promoted to the head coach then at Ole Miss. But you can't easily, just replace your offensive coordinator right before the playoffs start in the middle of the season. Right. It takes a while to learn an entirely new offense. You would never do that in the regular season. So LSU is letting these two coaches come back and continue to coach in the playoffs. Now, they've already won their first two games with these guys still coming back, so it wasn't clear if they would keep allowing them. This is the third game that now they're playing in the playoffs. They keep winning, so they are letting those two come back. They're going to play Miami there on Thursday night, Ole Miss versus Miami in the semifinals. So I'm definitely looking forward to this. It is a very unusual situation for sure. First of all, a coach leaving before the playoffs even starts, leading your team to the playoffs and then leaving for somebody else before the playoffs starts, is certainly an unusual situation to begin with. But it makes the whole thing, when his assistants follow him, becomes an unusual situation.
Yeah.
So, that's what's going on.
It's interesting to see how that impacts the game, if at all. But let's look at fantasy football news next. The NFL season ended, so did NTD's Fantasy Football League. Tell us all about it, Dave.
Steph, I don't know how much you and I here have talked about our NTD Fantasy Football League. Tiff and I had mentioned it a number of times on the evening news.
Yeah.
Now, you and I each had teams, so did Tiff. There was 20 teams overall. Only 8 qualified for the playoffs, and you can see here the champion was Shelby Melanson.
She was.
Of prime time. You can see Marie Otsu of DC got second. Arlene Richards, a Saturday evening anchor, she got third. I is the top seed. If you can see over there, go team, Dave.
All right.
Unfortunately, I lost in the first round to the aptly named Brack Jadleys. Very clever, Jack.
Yes,
Jack Bradley, the Brack Jadleys. He beat me, so it was a lot of fun. I must say, not many people in our league had ever played fantasy football before, or even knew what fantasy football was, as I found out, or even followed football. But hopefully those that didn't had a good time doing it.
I think so.
We're definitely looking forward to doing it again next year.
Good to hear.
We're definitely going to want you to play.
Thank you, Dave.
All right.
Well, now I've got something to, a record to try to beat. So there you go.
There you go. Try to beat 9th place. That's not bad at all. I must say that we also had an auto draft, all right, to level the playing field. Because, if you knew something about the NFL like I did, it would be a bit of an advantage.
Good point. So. That's very fair of you, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for all of your reporting today, Dave, as well.
You're welcome.
And with the Winter Olympics coming up, a Scottish island has already taken a place on the podium for its dense granite. The rock's natural elasticity and resistance to cracking makes it ideal for one of the most famous sports at the Games. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the stones.
Welcome to Ailsa Craig. 10 miles off Scotland's west coast, the uninhabited island is made almost entirely of microgranite. The dense and durable rock is central to Olympic curling. Jim English says 2 types of granite are found here.
This stone is in common green, and this is used for the body of the stone. There's like an elasticity property in the stone itself, which allows it to be struck all the time on the ice with other stones. So that's used as the body of the stone.
Both are used to make curling stones. Curlers push the heavy polished granite discs across ice toward a target using brooms to guide their path. Both types of stone are found on different parts of the remote island.
There's virtually no human disturbance, which does pose a slight extra constraint with the works here, and that we are bringing that human disturbance, but with working with case curlings, we're always very careful.
No one lives on Ailsa Craig. That makes it a thriving habitat for seabirds and grey seals. Ecologist Harry Fisher says workers strive to keep it that way.
2 different types of material in Ailsa Craig that we want to use is blue hone material, which forms the running surface of the curling stone, and common green, which forms the body of the stone. This product, the common green, can be found at the southern end of the island, and the blue hone can be found at the northern end of the island.
Granite harvesting on the island happens roughly every 5 years. The process requires a license and is only permitted in certain areas. Once gathered, a boat transports the boulders back to the Scottish mainland. Jim's son, Ricky English, shows off the final product.
Your typical curling stone that we produce here at the factory, it's made up of the Ailsa Craig common green, which you see here is the body of the curling stone. And why we use this product for the body of curling stone, because the granite itself has got like elasticity properties in it.
Kay's Curling has been making curling stones since 1851. English points out how the distinct details make an impact in the sport.
You see these wee black speckles here, these are called like feldspars. So when the 2 stones collide together on impact, this basically absorbs that energy and shoots it out the other end, so the stone doesn't actually split, so it makes it perfect for the body of a curling stone.
Kay's Curling has supplied every set of stones used in Olympic competition since 1998. The company says it produces between 1,800 and 2,000 stones per year. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A 1-month countdown appeared on a screen in Milan today. It's signaling the final month ahead of the opening of the 2026 Winter Olympic Games on February 6th. Residents and tourists in Milan commented on this final phase of preparations in the city. They voiced concerns about whether or not everything was ready and showed optimism that the enormous amount of work can be finished in time.
No, it's not quite ready yet. On the surface, everything looks great, but in reality, there are still many problems and many things that are being hidden.
We'll have to see once the games will actually take place. From what they say, it seems that I think we'll definitely manage to be ready. We've never failed before.
Oh, I think that's always the way with the Olympics. It's never ready until the last minute, but they always kind of pull it together. So I'm sure they'll do the same.
Italian provinces and more than 300 municipalities are in the build-up to the Winter Olympics. The Games will be co-hosted by Milan and the Dolomite resort of Cortina d'Ampezzo. They will run from February 6th through 22nd, with the Paralympics to follow in March. That's all we have time for this hour, but if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We would love to hear from you. We'll cover more news right after this break.